Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special episode of Your Internet Friends. This is what we want to call YIF Debates. Sticks here will be taking the floor for the majority of this. I've got to
Yeah,
go do something, so I'm going to leave you guys to it. I'll be
yeah,
back in a little bit.
yeah. Well. Do you want to introduce yourself and what your position is?
Certainly. Well, once again, thank you for letting me on the show. I do appreciate it.
No
Um,
problem.
to your viewers out there, I suppose I would just go a quick self summary. I am a neoconservative. I do believe in a strong foreign policy abroad. I do believe that dictators and despots, like in Syria and like in Iran and like in Russia, don't have a monopoly and don't have a right to abuse and hurt their people. I do believe that the United States, NATO, and the West in general need to have a policy of toppling and dismantling dictators, setting up republics or democracies abroad, and focus on spreading freedom globally. I do thank you for taking the time to listen to me, and I hope to convince some hearts and minds on this issue.
Okay, I guess I should summarize my position quickly as well. Uh, I'm not 100% against intervention. I just think it should be the very last resort and should be taken with a heavy heart. I think peaceful alternatives like negotiation and sanctions and so on should be taken before we intervene in a foreign country. And I think there needs to be sufficient evidence before we jump into intervention. And that's my position. So why do you think we need a why do you think we need to take a more intervention approach to foreign policy?
Well, certainly. So, the reason that foreign policy is so important today, and in particular, foreign intervention is so important, is because we have bad actors abroad who are not afraid and are willing to use violence to assert their authority and power over their own populations, their own cities, their own people. And the United States and NATO and the West in general, and free democratic nations abroad and across the globe have a responsibility to protect people in other nations from despotic regimes. It's very easy for people living on one end of the globe to to say to other people, well, I'm sorry you're going through this, but what can I do? It's up to us because it's up to us to do something about it. And the thing about dictators and despots like Kim Jong Un, Vladimir Putin, the Ayatollahs, Bashar al-Assad, is that these individuals are not willing to give up their power peacefully. They're not going to transition from a dictatorship to a republican or democratic style of governance. And it is up to us to use force to remove them because these individuals aren't going anywhere. They're very dangerous. In particular, we have the North Korean dictatorship expanding its nuclear arsenal. We have the Kremlin, who is using force in the Ukraine to expand its influence and is propping up bad actors like in Belarus. It's the Ayatollahs in Iran supporting Bashar al-Assad. And Bashar al-Assad, I mean, I don't think I need to go into detail of some of the terrible atrocities he's committing. So that's why it's so important for us in the United States, in NATO, and in the West in general to support freedom and democracy abroad, because tyrants and despots aren't going anywhere. We have to remove them.
Okay. Well, before I get into my counter argument, I just want to clarify I'm not a fan of any of these people. I'm not going to take I'm not going to take like the tanky position and like defend these shitty people. But what I would say is what I would say is what makes the West the arbiter of how countries run their internal affairs. That would be my question.
Well, it's often a question used, and the response would be this: the strong have a duty to defend the weak. The United States and NATO, in general, are strong organizations / nations. We have the ability to help other people suffering in the world, and for us to simply say, well, I'm sorry, you're going through this, or I sympathize, but there's nothing I can do, is taking a stance in which we say that the suffering of other people is not our concern. And the strong, like I say, have a duty to defend the weak. It's kind of like I would say how, if I can use something from Christianity as an example. So, for example, the parable of the man of of the men of talents. One who was given 1 talent, another who was given 3 talents, another who was given 10 talents. It is incumbent upon individuals who have much to give to others and to help others. If you have an abundance of wealth, if you have an abundance of prosperity, it's not simply there for you to hoard it and for you to simply ingratiate yourself and enjoy your wealth in a manner in which would show that you are just interested in depravity or into self or into a lifestyle that would be considered, just flaunting one's wealth. The wealthy have a responsibility to help the poor, and the strong have a responsibility to help the weak. And that is why the United States and NATO have a responsibility and a duty, and not just the United States and NATO, but all nations who are democratic and free have a responsibility and a duty to help those in nations that are not free.
Okay. I take a few issues with that stance. I would say what's sorry, I'm losing track of what I was saying. I was going to say what's I think you're assuming that people have the best intentions. What you're asking for, I think, will get easily exploited. I think intervention will be used for the wrong purposes to potentially further the interests of not just of private companies but also governments. I think intervention can easily be an excuse to impose imperialism and to exploit countries rather than liberate them. So I think on paper your reasoning sounds nice, but I think that's assuming that everyone's a good actor in this, and I just don't think that's the case. And I think history has proven that isn't the case at all.
Well, I would counter with this. So if you look at an interview that was done with Bernard-Henri Lévy, he is a famous French intellectual, and he is also an individual who has been supportive of most interventions around the globe. Particularly was supportive of the intervention in Yugoslavia and the intervention in Libya, and was also supportive of Rwanda, although he failed to get the French government to really intervene there in a manner to stop the killing. He was asked a question by Mehdi Hassan, who is a journalist with Al Jazeera, and he said, well, what is the difference between imperialism and interventionism? And he made this this counter that I think is very important, that the purpose of imperialistic interventions are to gain control of another country's resources, to gain control of another country's institutions of government, to gain control of something that another nation wants in particular. The interventionism or humanitarian interventionism is about intervening for the purpose to stop genocide, for the purpose to stop oppression and despotism and dictatorships. It is for the purpose of spreading freedom to people who do not have it. So there is always certainly this criticism that I've heard. Well, there's no difference, but there is a very big difference in terms of the statement you made. Well, what about the possibility of being exploited for the purpose of a corporation or for a government to gain control of another country in a manner that would be unhealthy or wrong or immoral? And that's why I think that America and the West are the best in the best position to prevent this, because the United States is not a willing imperialistic power. It is not a power that to seek control over other nations, to take control of the people, to take control of their resources. The United States and the American people are very much a unwilling power. They don't want to take control of the other peoples and other countries and their resources. They simply want largely to live their lives freely with some modicum of prosperity. And that is why that the suggestion that it can simply turn into imperialistic intervention is not the case, because we have checks and balances, in particular in our American system and in Western democracies in general, that help prevent this. Granted, obviously, we have to be vigilant and ensure that our interventions are taken because we are trying to prevent genocide and because we are trying to prevent dictatorships and despots from brutalizing their people. But there are the checks and balances that are within our system prevent what you might fear, and I will and that would be my rebuttal.
I mean, I don't agree with that. I would say history says quite a different story. I mean, I believe the United States overthrew a government in South America. I think it was Ecuador, or it might have been another country, but they overthrew the democratically elected leader. He wasn't even like an extremist. He was like a social democrat, I believe, and they overthrew him because they wanted control of this. I think it was the supply. I think it was their banana supply, because I think they wouldn't ship to the United. They posed a risk to importing them to the United States. So I think they wanted to seize it so they could control their supply. What? Hold on, I just want to look up what country it was again.
I think you're referring to Honduras, correct?
Yeah, Honduras. Yeah, I believe it was Honduras. Yeah. And then I think there's also modern examples. For example, North Korea. Yeah, it's a horrible dictatorship, but there isn't. That's not the only reason I could see the United States wanting it. It's a massively strategically advantageous position of the world to hold, because it would give the United States a border with China. I mean, countries like Iran and Iraq, I think, need to go without saying how resource-wise, how advantageous it would be to control a country like Iran. I think checks and balances are fine and well, but from the state of America internally and its history with foreign policy, I'm not nearly as optimistic as you about the outcome.
Well, when you're referring to the term "banana republic" in terms of the coup in Honduras, but I think people wrongly suggest that the American government itself was responsible for that coup, um, which occurred during the early 1900s. Um, it was American businessmen who conspired with mercenaries in order to topple the in a coup to create a coup d'état. But it was not the United States government that was directly involved with that. I think the one caveat that I think maybe to your point that the United States government did not necessarily do anything to stop it. But I don't. I think, but it's incorrect to say the United States government was directly involved with that.
Oh
Regarding
yeah, I know it wasn't directly involved. I know it was basically done through some sort of proxy. Um, but
correct, and I. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, I was just saying. But uh, could you not see that happening today in modern America with how much corporations and private entities are in bed with the Republican and Democratic Party?
I don't think so, no. Let me give you an example. So you did mention North Korea, for example. North Korea is a nation in which uh, there is a dictatorship, a family dictatorship, in which one person and his family control the entire nation and decide the lives and fates of millions of people. And people's lives are literally at the whim of one person. um, to suggest that American I'm not saying you, I'm saying that some people who may suggest that it's just American businessmen who want to get a hold of North Korea's resources or stuff
Oh
like.
no, no, I don't think they want to get hold of their resources. I think the United States government want their border. That's what I believe.
I don't think that's the case. If you look at the United States policy in terms of the Korean Peninsula, we have supported the South, obviously. They are a geopolitical ally, a regional ally, obviously, one of the United States' longest term alliances. But the United States has has taken a hands-off approach mostly to North Korea, and that we have hoped, um, and foolishly, that North Korea at one point in time would become democratic, and that eventually democratic forces would do what war what a war would do, but that war would be unnecessary because North Korea would change internally because people assumed that the situation in North Korea, which after the Cold War, in which North Korea's economy literally went into a death spiral, and in which sadly millions died, they thought that, well, this would be the opportunity for democracy to arise in North Korea. But that hasn't been the case, though. We've seen instead that forces there have become stronger and consolidated their power. And the United States largely just wants peace. And
Mhm.
it's not about the border. We obviously are a geopolitical foe with China, and we're obviously a regional foe with China. But but there have been American individuals in intellectual circuits, if you read Foreign Policy magazine, who have suggested that in return for toppling the North Korean dictatorship, we should leave the Korean peninsula and offer that as an olive branch to China. So I don't agree. I do not agree with that.
I mean, I'm not in favor of getting rid of the United States presence at the Korean Peninsula. What I'm against is invasion or intervention in North Korea. That's what I'm against.
Well, I understand that war is not an ideal situation. It never is. But unfortunately, I don't see any other out for North Korea. I see North Korea in particular expanding its nuclear arsenal. That it was thought by many Americans in numerous different areas of government that North Korea would never be able to get a nuclear weapon. And now they don't just have one; they have at least a dozen that we don't even have a complete estimate. We know that they have them, but we don't know how many they have completely, and they are expanding that arsenal. It's been a desire of the regime to expand its nuclear arsenal, and these weapons are not designed for like simply having a stronger position in the world, or because a nuclear weapon, a nation having that, it does elevate one's nation's position. But these are weapons that are not designed for that. They are designed to be used offensively against either South Korea or against the United States. And unfortunately, the longer we kick the can down the road, the more dangerous the situation becomes.
Right. I mean, you see their nuclear arsenal as an excuse to intervene. I mean, I see it more as I see it more as less of a reason to intervene, because to me, the human cost of a war in the Korean Peninsula has the potential to be so great. I think it makes more sense just to leave North Korea as it is, because what's the point of invading the North when the human cost is arguably going to be 100 times worse than anything you could possibly imagine coming from the North Korean regime? I would say uh, uh, a strategy similar to what happened in the 1980s with East Germany and the Soviet Union, of working towards denuclearization of the peninsula, of more cooperation and finding uh, co- finding things in common with the North Korean people. I think it's the only good thing that Trump did was open up relations more with North Korea, and offering that door towards potential more of a peaceful coexistence, and potentially even reform within the Korean government. I think that's the path we should. I'm very annoyed at Trump. Obviously, I think he squandered it and has ruined any possibility of peace in the peninsula. But I think that's a path we should be towards. And unlike you, I think it's a path that's credible, and it's something that can happen. And I think it's a much more desirable path than war.
Well, I wish I could say that a peaceful dialogue with the North Korean regime and the DPRK would ease tensions, and that they would dismantle their apparatus of state terror and allow the country to live peacefully, and allow the citizens to live peacefully, and to not engage in violence. The unfortunate situation is that the government in North Korea is not intent on keeping the peace. They have taken a policy of expanding their military arsenal for the purpose of aggressive action. We have tried numerous times to extend olive branches to the DPRK, even with the present dictatorship, and not just Kim Jong Un, but his father and his grandfather. There have been attempts by the United States to de escalate tensions in the hopes that the North Korean government would democratize slowly internally, and that things would be better, and that there would be no need for violence. The problem is that the government in North Korea and the DPRK, its official policy is violence against the United States and is violence against the South. And even the Trump administration offered an olive branch to the DPRK, the summit in Singapore was an opportunity for the DPRK and Kim Jong-un to say, we will stop oppressing our people, we will stop being a dictatorship, we will stop hostile actions against the South, we will democratize, we will dismantle our nuclear weapons, and in return, we will be allowed to enter the world's economic community and the world as an independent nation. They turned that down, and they've continued to turn down attempts, and unfortunately, their policy is violence. Obviously, war is not ideal, but war is sometimes necessary. In World War I, for example, the United States lost hundreds of thousands of good, brave men, and it was a terrible tragedy. But
Okay.
if the United States had not intervened to stop the Kaiser, Kaiser Wilhelm would have been the superior leader of Europe. He would have dominated Europe. And while I cannot say that I can't predict the future in an alternate scenario, I do know this, that a world with Britain, which was somewhat democratic, and France, which was somewhat democratic, was a much better world than a world where the Prussian military dictatorship style would have been the dominant force in Europe. So it's not ideal, obviously, but it is necessary, and we have to realize that.
I understand the need for war, but I think comparing something like Germany in the 1910s, which it was it wasn't like Korea where it was a smaller it was a smaller nation of it was a smaller nation of like a pretty like minute population in comparison to other nations. Germany was in many ways it was an equal to France and Britain. It had it had this a similar amount of territory. It had a similar population. It had similar military capabilities and a similar economy. The North is a much smaller, is a much smaller economy compared to the South and Japan and the United States. Maybe not so much its military, but in my opinion, that can at least be contained, and I think it makes far more sense to try and contain North Korea as opposed to invading it, because I think what you're not lost worth overthrowing the North Korean regime, because I don't think it is. North Korea has about a population of 23 million people. If they invaded the South, if they launched nukes at Japan, like say they launched a nuke at Tokyo, I believe the population of that area alone is like 14 million. I believe the central Tokyo area, and obviously South Korea that has 50 million people, millions and millions could be slaughtered at that border. You would have probably hundreds of thousands of US troops as well, putting their lives on the line for this war. So I think you could reach a death toll easily of like 50 million people. Is that worth risking to overthrow a nation that's maybe it's terrible the atrocities it's done, but it's killed about maybe 4 or 5 million people in total. Is that a good trade-off for the amount of damage and the amount of life lost in a war of that scale?
Well, for one, you make a suggestion in which 50 million people would perish in such a war.
I'm not saying they would, but that's potentially, that's a possibility.
I think it's a bit of exaggeration. We have to be realistic. in terms of our intervention, because the problem is a lot of times the argument against interventions, there tends to be a lot of exaggerated language. Millions will die. It will be utter, complete chaos and destruction. I think that we need to have a rational discussion on the results of intervention in war. But to your point, the North Korean regime, as you have admitted, has killed millions of its own people.
Mm-hmm.
In containing such a nation in which it is willing and has shown and that it will kill its own people to stay in power, if that nation were to gain a hold of nuclear weapons and use them, which is their ultimate intent, that would mean greater destruction. So let me give you an example.
Why would they use them though? What advantage is there to using nuclear weapons? They would just get obliterated by their opposition.
Well, let me explain then. So the North Koreans have been attempting to expand their new nuclear arsenal, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And doing so for some time.
Yeah.
They've also been expanding their submarine capabilities and their submarine arsenal. Now, why are they doing this? The North Koreans understand that they cannot beat the United States in a war. They know it is impossible, but know they can potentially beat the South. The South obviously has a more modern military, but the North does not. But the North is betting that if it can get some nuclear weapons, even with its arsenal, which yes is behind, but still pretty numerous, they might be able to win the war. And there have
I mean, they wouldn't though, because the United States nuclear arsenal can easily wipe out the country.
Well, let me finish, because this is why I'm trying to. This is my point here, that the North Koreans are expanding their submarine arsenal and their nuclear capabilities as to sort of hold the United States hostage in a way, because the North Koreans understand that
that's exactly how the United States deterrent works. That's the main reason countries want nukes. It's not to use them; it's to deter people from intervening in their interests.
Well, that would be rational actors, you know. Even the United States is a rational actor. The North Korean regime is not a rational actor. If we look,
What do you mean? What do you mean a rational actor? I think self-preservation, extends to pretty much every human being. I'm pretty sure Kim Jong-un doesn't want to die in nuclear fire. I'm pretty sure his generals and his regime want to end in a nuclear holocaust. I don't think that's in the interests of anyone in the North Korean regime. I don't think that's the interest for any human unless they suffer from some sort of severe mental defect, which, as far as I'm aware, Kim Jong-un might be a tyrant, but as far as I'm aware, I don't think he's like clinically insane, as far as I'm aware.
Well, Kim Jong-un may not be rapidly insane, but that doesn't mean he's not mad. It's the same way in Bashar al-Assad. Bashar al-Assad is a very educated man. He's a doctor. He's very smart, but that doesn't mean he's not mad. He's still willing to slaughter hundreds of thousands of his own people in order to stay in power. And with Kim Jong-un, it's the same thing. All we need is one instance in which Kim Jong-un decides using a nuclear weapon would be in his best interest.
I can apply that logic to Donald Trump. I could apply that in theory. You could apply that to any world leader. I mean, just look at in 1963 with the Cuban Missile Crisis, when there was much more even heads back then, and how close we came back to war, a nuclear war. That's a risk with any human being because humans aren't infallible.
Well, let's look at Trump, for example. You mentioned, oh, well, you can do that to anyone, even Trump, for example. In the United States, there are checks and balances to prevent a person, even the president, from notching a nuclear weapon again unconstitutionally. Even, again, remember Colin Powell, for example. Colin Powell did an interview, I think it was with ABC, in which individuals are stating, well, what if Trump in the last few weeks of his presidency, were to launch a nuclear weapon, a nuclear strike? Colin Powell made it clear that the president cannot do that. There are individuals and systems in place to prevent a president from simply throwing a nuclear weapon haphazardly. That is not the same case in North Korea.
I'm not saying
those checks and
I'm
balances.
not saying there's necessarily a button on his desk. What I'm saying is, if Trump wanted to, though, he could have worsened foreign relations, and he could have inched us closer to war. I felt just as safe with Kim Jong Un at the helm as I did with Donald Trump. Kim Jong Un might have more direct power, of course, but I still think the risk is there with Trump as well. I might have taken longer, but I think the risk was just as even on the other side.
I can't agree with that because the facts are against that. The fact of the matter is that even a United States president cannot simply launch a nuclear weapon at his will.
I understand that.
Yeah, but the North Korean government can do that and probably will do that if they see an opportunity.
They've existed for what 70 years now, and they haven't done it yet.
Well, the North Korean government has only recently acquired nuclear weapons.
Yeah, and they've had them since 2004, I believe. Is it 2003?
They've been applying their nuclear ambitions since the early 2000s, but they've only recently, within the last like 5 or 6 years, actually acquired the capability to produce nuclear weapons.
Okay.
So that is the more accurate time frame in which the North Korean government, the DPRK, acquired nuclear weapons.
Okay.
But we have to understand is that we are in a situation in which we are risking a serious escalation of hostilities in the Korean Peninsula because of the erratic behavior and of the aggressive overtures of the North Korean regime. And it is much better for us to fight an offensive war against the North Koreans rather than fight a defensive war in which we let them use the nukes first, in which there is no guarantee we will be able to stop them. And the North Koreans...
I mean, you wouldn't be able to stop them, but they would be annihilated, and I don't see why the North would want to risk annihilation.
Well, the North is a purpose trying to acquire nuclear weapons. Because its purpose is to hold the United States hostage.
Well, it's to deter the United States like every other nation on Earth.
Let me finish, because I do need to make this point because I wasn't able to finish it earlier. The North Koreans are currently expanding their submarine arsenal and their nuclear arsenal. Why? Their purpose is to put nuclear missiles on their submarines for the purpose of launching them against American cities. Hawaii, Alaska, territories in the Guam and Polynesia. Their purpose is for this, to say to the United States, well, if you go to war against us, we will launch a nuclear weapon. And you will then see an American city potentially targeted and hit by a nuclear weapon.
Yeah,
that's the purpose of these nuclear weapons. That's
the purpose of every country to have nuclear weapons, is deterrent. That's the whole point of them. Of course, North Korea is going to do everything to bolster its defense, especially when they have such great odds against them. Of course, they're going to. If you have like giants on your doorstep, of course you're going to take tons of precautions to I'm not defending. I don't want the North Korea. I'm not in favor of the North Korean regime, but I'm saying, just from any nation's standpoint, if I have such a great threat on my doorstep, I'm going to try and defend myself by any means necessary. I'm going to take greater means than other nations to defend myself.
But that is the situation in which you consider a rational actor. We have to understand that the North Korean dictatorship is not a rational actor in this discussion here. The North Koreans understand that without the United States, they could potentially beat the South and win and reunite the Korean Peninsula under their control.
There's many nations. There's many nations on Earth that have erratic regimes, and they haven't gone rabid and done and they haven't gone and just started invading every country left, right, and center.
Well, that's not true, because we have, for example, the Iranian regime, which has supported numerous proxies throughout the Middle East.
Proxies, but what about direct warfare? When's the last time Iran participated in direct warfare with another nation?
A proxy war is still a form of direct warfare. It's simply a way of washing
No, by definition,
nationally
it's not.
and saying that
By definition, it's not direct warfare. A proxy is
through
through another party. That would make it indirect warfare.
Well, no, because these proxies are essentially armed by the Iranians. They're supported by the Iranians, and even at times, Iranians are on the
I'm not disputing that, but that doesn't make it direct warfare. That doesn't make it direct warfare from Iran. That makes it indirect, because they're using a third party.
It is. It's simply a way of washing your hands of it. And if you say, well, Iran has.
It's not to water down. It's not to water down.
It's
not to water down what Iran has done. It's just stating a fact that isn't direct warfare by definition. That makes no sense.
Well, I will have to agree to disagree on this point, but
no, it's a fact. It's not direct warfare. If it was direct warfare, that would be the nation engaging in war directly from their nation, not from a proxy. By definition, that's second-hand warfare. That's using another nation to do your dirty work.
Well, indirect warfare, its definition is, or an indirect approach, is a military strategy that attempts to inflict high casualties upon an enemy or massive destruction with as little resistance as possible. So we have to understand that also, even in the case of Iran, for example, directly attack the United States, they have, because the
in that definition, how does that refute my definition? It doesn't. It's pretty much what I said.
Well, as I've said before, the strategy of indirect warfare is no different than attacking an enemy directly. You're simply attempting to hide your responsibility or cover your responsibility. It's just like.
I'm not saying it's good. You're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying it's not direct warfare.
Well, as I've said before, we're going to have to agree to disagree.
Okay. We'll go on beyond that. So, I was using those countries to point out that a country's not just going to go crazy and start invading everywhere left, right, and center. Like obviously North Korea is not going to have the checks and balances compared to a democratic country, compared to a country like the United States or a European country, but there's bound to be some. There's bound to, be some checks and balances, and there's going to be some even heads within the North Korean regime. I think you have in your head like they're just a bunch of supervillains rubbing their hands together, trying to inflict bad things for no reason. They're not. That's not how human beings work. The reason they want to keep their regime alive is to serve their interests and what they think's best for themselves. They're not doing it because they're not doing it because they're pure evil. It's because they are human beings who have a self-interest.
That's not true at all, because it's because they're evil. If only an evil person.
Okay.
Well, no, well,
Where does who's the authority on what is good and evil?
We are, the people are. It's if we have basic understandings of what is good and what is evil.
But every society.
That is why we create just laws.
Yeah, but every society has very different ideas of what's good and evil. If we universally agreed on what was good and evil, we wouldn't have competing philosophies, would we?
We have competing philosophies, but we have basic understandings of what is off the table. For example, in pretty much every nation in the country, in the world, sorry, rape is criminalized, because we understand that forcing a woman against their will to engage in sexual activity.
Yeah, but in other countries,
it's the same thing with murder.
Mr.
Six, you keep interrupting me. Can I please finish my point? You keep interrupting, Mr. Six.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. The world has basic understandings of what is good and what is evil. We have those understandings. And so to suggest that, well, it's murder, for example, as what these dictators and despots do in their countries, well, they're not really evil, and that's just their way of life.
I don't like the word evil, because I think it's a way of alienating other human beings from who we are. We're basically saying, well, I could never be like that. Of course you can be like that. If you were raised in a regime that was taught you were God from birth, of course you had the potential to be like that. Every human being has the potential to be like that, and the word evil only exists to alienate us from those concepts and say this is something else, and it's not. It's us. You're capable of doing it. I'm capable of doing it. We've just not had the opportunity for that to happen. I've never been the dictator of a nation. You've never been the dictator of a nation. I'm not saying Kim Jong-un's good. I'm just saying I don't have this clear-cut objective morality that you have. Because, well, I don't believe in objective morality. I don't believe you can derive morality from anywhere. It comes from social contracts that are in the mutual interest of a population to abide by, and that's about it.
Mr. Sticks, what you're arguing for is moral relativism, in which anything goes, in which a society, well, if you think that abuse against another individual is right, that makes it for you, but not for me.
Well, where does morality derive from then? Do you believe in God?
I don't like to answer this question, because then it gets into a question of.
Oh, but you have to believe in a higher. You have to believe in a higher. I'm getting an echo.
Sorry, there was someone sent me a sort of message, but you don't have to be religious to have a moral standing.
You basically have to believe in a higher power if you believe in objective morality. Yeah.
No, you don't. You have to, because there are basic understandings of what is off limits and what is okay. Because like a dictator.
No, not at all. I mean, not at all. Like the definition of what rape is can vary wildly from nation to nation. I mean, in Iran, for example, they think giving a man forcibly a sex change because he's gay is good morality. They believe that's morally just.
And what does the majority of the world think? The majority of the world who is not under the oppression of
I believe.
government
I mean,
says,
I
that's
believe
absolutely abhorrent.
I believe a good portion of the Islamic population does support such actions. Yeah, like I believe people in the millions do support that. They don't have the same standards of morality. A lot of there's probably millions of Muslims who, like think throwing gay people off of buildings is perfectly fine. There is no. It's the same. There's probably millions of Christians who's as well who believe that morality is relative to like a population. It has nothing to. There is no universal definition of population. Can we agree that murder and rape generally is maybe bad? Yeah, sure.
So that should stand your point.
But
That completely blows your point, though, that we can't be the deciders. So that completely blows your point apart then, because if you mentioned earlier, for example, Kim Jong Un, and I hate to interrupt, but I'm sorry, I want to make this point real quick. You mentioned Kim Jong Un. You said, "Well, I've never been the dictator of a nation, and if but that doesn't matter, just because because we all have a basic understanding, at least rational human beings do, that murder is wrong, that genocide is wrong, that oppression is wrong, and we have a duty and we are bound to stop.
No, we don't.
You say we absolve our responsibility.
My point is, we don't know, because the definition of rape and murder in other parts of the world is completely different from other parts of the world. As I say, murder is abhorrent, but it's fine to kill gay people. It's fine to kill trans people. It's fine to kill Jews. In this part of the world, it's completely arbitrary. Of course,
morality is not arbitrary.
Of course, if no nation is no group of people is going to advocate for a free for all killing everyone, because then society wouldn't function.
Then we have that essentially in North Korea, in which a select group of people get to commit free for all against people who say, I don't think the dear leader is doing a good job.
Yeah, but they still have standards of who deserves to be who deserves to be killed and who doesn't.
So because they say only these people get to be killed and no one else, that makes it somehow rational. No,
I didn't say it makes it rational. I'm saying there's no objective morality. When you try to apply this objective morality to things, it's a bad argument. It doesn't help. It doesn't do anything. A moralist argument is not a good. This moralist argument you're trying to give is not a good argument.
No, it is, because you have made a moral relativist argument, and moral relativism is the death of societies. It's why we have so much apathy today in terms of foreign policy.
It would have been it would have maybe been the death of society like 500 years ago, when we believed that that the Earth was flat, and that there was elves and goblins living in the woods. Sure, today we have a better understanding of science, and we have a better understanding of reality. We can comprehend things like the reason we have these standards in society is because a group of people have agreed this is the social contract that mutually benefits us as a whole. I mean, the reason, for example, in the Abrahamic faiths, why eating pork was morally abhorrent is because it was a meat that went off very easily. At some point in society, maybe gay people were a risk to the population expanding, or they were concerned about, I don't know, like STDs being spread, or somebody made up something and spread as a rumor. It's all relative. There's no objective morality.
No, there is not. If we have a basic understanding, Mr. Sticks, that murder is wrong, and we have a basic understanding that
because we
have legal. Mr. Sticks, I did not interrupt you. You made a long statement. Let me please finish.
Sure.
You have a habit, unfortunately, of interrupting me when I start to make my points. Please let me at least make a short point.
Okay.
If we have a basic understanding, Mr. Sticks, that murder is wrong, if we have a basic understanding that rape is wrong, if we have a basic understanding that child abuse is wrong,
Yeah,
now
but
we have
yeah.
different we have
But-
different legal definitions of what constitutes child abuse, or what constitutes rape, or what constitutes murder. But we still have the basic premise
That's
that these
because
actions are wrong. Then we must then say that there is not this case of moral relativism.
Yeah, but that's because we were both brought up in Anglo-Judeo-Christian societies, so we're going to have similar standards of morality. That's that. Yeah, yes. The United Kingdom and the United States has very similar morality. From and other nations in the world would be teaching completely different standards of morality. It's true that no country on earth is going to be saying, like, you can kill whoever, but they have different standards of who you can kill, who you can rape, what you can eat, how you dress, how you socially interact within society. There isn't this universal morality like you claim. There's different standards for all these things.
Mr. Sticks, there is a universal standard for murder and genocide. If we see what's going on in North Korea, in which a regime literally shoots people in the head for criticizing the regime or for watching a South Korean film, if we see a regime which literally allows the rape of women in concentration camps by prison guards at will, if we see a regime in which commits human experiments, as the North Korean regime does, on political prisoners and dissidents.
I'm not saying that.
Mr. Sticks, you're doing it again. You interrupted me and I haven't even gotten 30 seconds in. Can I please make a point, Mr. Sticks? I'm being respectful, Mr. Sticks, but please at least let me get a minute.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So Mr. Sticks, if you have a regime that commits these grotesque actions, you know that is wrong. Universally, we know it's wrong. It's not simply Judeo-Christian societies. Even Asian societies and African societies have laws criminalizing murder. They understand the concept that unjust murder, unjust killing.
I'm not arguing.
It shoots down your argument that there's not.
This isn't even my argument.
It shoots down your argument that there's not such a thing as moral relativism. And for you to suggest, sir, that the North Korean regime should be okay because, well, that's their way of doing things. No,
that's not my argument at all. All I was saying, no, that wasn't my argument. No, all my argument was that Kim Jong-un isn't this comically evil person. He's not a G.I. Joe villain. There's a reason he's like this. And if, in my opinion, if you want I think a much better way of getting to the solutions in North Korea is to understand the psyche of Kim Jong-un, and labeling him like an evil G.I. Joe villain is not going to help anything. It's just going to fuel unnecessary strains on relations between these nations, and it's going to lead to more provocation and misunderstanding. That's my argument. It's not an argument against whether we should invade North Korea or not. It's how we should view their leaders. And I think the way you view Kim Jong-un is a lot more dangerous than the way I view Kim Jong-un.
Mr. Sticks, you ignore the reality, unfortunately, at your own peril. And I say this in a sympathetic manner, because you believe that Kim Jong-un is not a...
I don't believe there is such thing.
Mr. Sticks, you're doing it again. I haven't even gotten 10 seconds this time.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
Mr. Sticks, if you believe that Kim Jong-un is not a threat to global freedom globally, and at the very least not a regional global threat to freedom and to human rights, or that you say, well, even though he's doing what we believe to be somewhat wrong, it's not our business because they don't necessarily believe it's not wrong. And that's not the case. We have basic understandings of what is good and what is right. And what Kim Jong un is doing in North Korea is not just evil, it's absolutely abhorrent. The murder and oppression of his own people, millions have died in North Korea under his regime because the regime was willing to let its own population starve.
I understand
Nuclear
that.
aspirations rather than dismantle its apparatus of terror and open the nation up to democratic institutions.
I understand that. My argument isn't do nothing about North Korea. I've already told you. My position is I think containment is our best option at the moment. I believe that intervention has a lot of question marks around it and a lot of potential for mass human death and mass destruction to the nations involved in the Korean Peninsula. That's my argument. All I was saying was that I think painting Kim Jong Un as this cartoon villain doesn't help anything. It just makes things worse. It just characterizes North Korea, and it doesn't get to the root of the problems in the country. It doesn't get to the root of the problems in the peninsula.
Oh, well, Mr. Sticks, the problem is that sometimes caricatures are true. And in the case of the North Korean dictatorship, the caricature of Kim Jong un is a reality. This is not simply an individual like Bashar.
Okay. Well, I don't view
I haven't even
any.
gotten
I
5 seconds this time.
I don't.
I
I
haven't
don't
even
view.
gotten five seconds this time, and you're interrupting. I did not interrupt you when you made your last statement once. Can I please get 5 seconds, sir, without an interruption, Mr. Sticks?
Because I'm interrupting you because you're. Well, a lot of your arguments you're straw manning me on.
No, that's not true. Your argument of moral relativism, I find absolutely ridiculous. But I let you have your say because I was trying to be respectful. Please let me have my say at least. In
Okay,
regard to North Korea, the caricatures are true. Let me give you an example. So if you look at Vladimir Putin, for example, he's a dictator and a despot, but he prefers not to get his hands dirty when it comes to killing and murder. He prefers to, commit poisonings and such like that, things that are sad and slow deaths, but not particularly ones that would make people say, "Oh my goodness!" in terms of the horrificness of it. When you have Kim Jong Un, Kim Jong Un has literally sentenced people to death in his country by machine gun fire, by anti-aircraft weapons. That is an individual who cannot be reasoned with. That is an individual who enjoys killing and murder for the sake of it. And containment is not a reasonable policy for an individual like this.
Okay. Okay. As I say, I don't like to. Well, I don't caricature any human being because you. There's a story behind how Kim Jong Un is like that, and I believe understanding how to see if this was Nazi Germany and it was Hitler, that would be a different story. That wasn't a containable threat. Understand that North Korea is a containable threat, and the amount of the stakes that you want to put on the line, in my opinion, are so monumentally huge. It's not worth taking, and I think the peaceful solutions are the best way forward, and they should be our first choice before we jump to intervention. And I think I don't like Kim Jong Un, and I wish I didn't have to deal with him, but we have to. We have to talk to the North. We have to negotiate with them, and you might not like it. You might not like Kim Jong Un's face, but understanding him and his regime and trying to find common ground and to minimize the death and destruction in that country, I think is way more constructive than jumping to intervention.
Mr. Sticks, unfortunately, that's an argument that's been used time and time again throughout history. In World War I, we had an anti-war. So in World War I, for example, we had an anti-war movement in which the United States said that people in the United States said, "This is not our war. You know, this is not our fight," and it became our fight and it became our war. In World War II, we had a movement called the American First Movement, which said, "Why are we going to send brave American boys to die in a war that is not our fight?" And that war became our fight. In each case, we were dealing with regimes and governments whose
And I would,
like
I
10
would.
seconds. I haven't even gotten 15
Okay,
seconds.
okay, sure, okay, fine. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Six, please. So we in the same case with North Korea, we're not dealing with a rational actor. He does not wish to be taken as a rational actor. He is a dictator and a despot who literally has committed genocide against his own people, who literally throws people in prison in the worst conditions imaginable simply because they watched a South Korean film. And that's even punishable by death. Reading a Bible is punishable by being sentenced to life imprisonment in some of the worst labor camps. So this is not a regime that we can negotiate with or talk to.
I disagree. I think, well, for example, you keep going to World War One and World War Two as examples. Comparing Nazi Germany, for example, which is a way more of a immediate is way more of a substantial threat that actually has the potential to expand itself and uh, participate in world domination. I understand that. And your point about, oh, it became our war. Well, yeah, that's the approach. We don't disagree there. Then my approach is, war should be the very last resort. And in the case of the United States, yeah, World War One became our war. But that was because it became a last resort. They tried to not intervene. And I would rather take that approach first before we jump into something so brash. And in regards to the North Korean regime, I mean, I disagree. Maybe Kim Jong Un won't be the regime that turns back North Korea, but to be honest, I would rather wait until the next leader comes in then and the leader after that, because the amount of the amount of human lives you're willing to put on the line for that war, to me, far outweighs any potential amount of death and destruction North Korea does internally, which, in my opinion, will be dwarfed by any war that happens on the peninsula. The peninsula, a war in the peninsula will dwarf any atrocities by the North Korean regime, in my opinion. You're wanting a solution that's you're wanting a solution that's what's the word? You're wanting a solution that's going to it's going to be far more strife than it's worth. It's just going to create more problems and huge implications. And you don't know what the outcome after a war of that might happen. A new regime might pop up. The global situation could worsen as a result of that. There's so many question marks around that. Doesn't it make far more sense to contain this threat and monitor it and maybe try and get some incremental changes done than risk a war that'll cost millions and millions of lives, massive destruction to the nations around the Korean Peninsula? It makes zero sense why you would jump to a war.
Sir, in order to stop terrorism, in order to stop dictators, you have to use force. They are not interested in negotiation except in the advancement of their own interest. I haven't even gotten 5 seconds. Mr. Sticks, you went through a long speech, and I didn't even get 5 seconds.
Okay, sure. Okay, go ahead.
Sir. Can you stop interrupting?
Okay,
Once again, you're doing it.
Okay.
I didn't even get 5 seconds this time, and you interrupted me again. I do not do that to you, sir. Have the same courtesy to me, please.
Okay, well, we'll get a moderator in the future.
Mr. Sticks, again, you have said that we can contain this threat. You have said that we can negotiate with the regime. The United States has consistently, and the world have consistently attempted to negotiate with the Kim regime.
I didn't say we can. I didn't say we
no,
can.
I will not be interrupted this time, Mr. Sticks. Mr. Sticks, I will not be interrupted. I let you speak. I will not be interrupted this time. Please be respectful to me. I'm being respectful to you.
But you're putting words in my mouth.
No, I'm not putting words in your mouth.
I'm saying we should try and
said that moral relativism is okay. You have said that if the Kim Jong-un murders his own people, well, I've never been a tyrant.
I didn't say it was
right. That's absolutely ridiculous. Okay, it's absolutely disgusting, and that is absolutely foul. Okay, because we allow this regime to continue to do what it does by our not intervening.
You're not answering my question. You're not. I'm going to interrupt if you're
I
not
already answered your. No, I am answering your question, and I have been.
I understand
to this point, but you continually interrupt.
I understand that North Korea is a brutal regime. I understand that, but you haven't addressed the implications of the intervention you want.
Yes, and an intervention in the region would remove a dictator who literally commits mass murder on the level of Genghis Khan. We
and
have
an
individual who literally commits some of the worst grotesque acts in history. The Huns, for example, when
how does it make sense though to how does it make sense to
You're not arguing in good faith, but I'm gonna stay in this debate though.
I am arguing in good faith.
No, you're not. You continually interrupted me, and every time I try to
you're the one who's not arguing in good faith.
10 seconds. I let you speak, and you're constantly being rude. So if you want to debate this way, fine. I'll go back and forth this way if you wish. I tried to be respectful, but if you're not going to give me literally 10 seconds to speak without interruption, where I let you say everything you want and then give a counter, I'll come back the same way. I don't want that removing the Kim Jong-un regime is bad. How so? When you have a dictator who literally commits mass murder,
I think it's bad.
Wants to get nuclear weapons, a dictator who literally says that people should get killed because they don't like him. That is absolutely moral relativism to the point of suicide.
To the point of suicide. I'm not the one advocating for a massive war on the Korean Peninsula
against a mass murdering dictator, not against a democratic government. That's completely different.
Which could potentially kill millions and millions of people, far more than the population of North Korea itself.
North Korea is
and open the gates of hell
for you to say that we should do something about it. How many more million North Koreans have to die for you to say
how many million? How about you
because it doesn't affect your privileged Western lifestyle. As long as you can have your video games and enjoy your life, the suffering of people in North Korea doesn't concern you.
No, it does concern me, but
no, it doesn't. It's sad that you have argued complete moral relativist nonsense, in which you says what you said earlier, end quote, that, well, I've never been a dictator, so I wouldn't know what was right if I were born in that situation. No, sir. No person has the moral right to slaughter millions of their own people.
I didn't say he had the moral right.
A familial dynasty because they don't like his despotic and tyrannical rule.
You're twisting my words.
Living that, no, I am not twisting your words. Exactly.
You are.
You can roll back the tape. For letting the person doing that is absolutely ridiculous.
Gentlemen, Sticks, let him speak.
But he's strawmanning me, and
no, it's not. I'm tearing your argument apart, and you're getting angry and trying to shut me up. That's the whole point.
I'm not trying to shut you up.
I think I'd have to come in here, but clearly I do. All right. So continue. I'm just going to, I'm gonna be here.
He's trying to say that I
Mr. Sticks, even people in the
want
chat are saying, "Let me have the floor." You see, even these people are saying it. Come on.
Okay, but try not and straw man me, okay?
No, don't get angry when I tear apart your argument. Come back with a reasonable response. Don't try to interrupt me every 5
Tear
seconds.
apart my argument, you mean make up a stance that I'm not
Did you not
for.
say that I've never been a dictator, so I wouldn't know what's wrong or right? You've never been in Kim Jong's positions. You did
No,
say
I didn't say. I didn't.
it doesn't
say,
feel nice when you do it, sir.
I
It doesn't
didn't.
feel nice when you do it, sir.
Didn't
Have
say.
the same respect for me that I had for you earlier.
He's making up shit about me.
Sticks, mute when he's talking. Net, mute when Sticks is talking, please.
Okay, right. Well, I just want to clear one thing. I wasn't saying that that made Kim Jong Un right. I was saying it's important to understand the psyche of Kim Jong Un, and to understand the psyche of Kim Jong Un, painting him as a villain doesn't do that. That shuts down the conversation on Kim Jong Un, and it shuts down any potential progress on how we can deal with him. That's what I'm arguing for. Am I a moral relativist? Sure, because I don't think morality derives from anywhere, and you can sing to the heavens that you think morality is objective, but if you can't point to an authority if you can't point to an authority or a natural order that enforces this supposed objective morality, it doesn't exist. I'm so sorry.
Mr. Twitch, the assumption that your argument relies on is that you are dealing with a rational actor. The North Korean regime is not a rational actor. The Kim Jong-un is not a rational actor. I will say this to you, Mr. Sticks. If Kim Jong-un announced tomorrow that he was resigning his post as the leader of North Korea and that he would submit himself to The Hague for crimes against humanity and that he was going to dismantle his apparatus of terror and that democratic elections would go on in North Korea and that the people in his concentration camps would be set free and that they would be given psychological, emotional, and monetary compensation, and that those who committed abuses against them would be prosecuted and held to account under the law, I would say that war is not necessary. But guess what? We're not in that situation. We're in a situation, sir, in which we have a despot and dictator acquiring nuclear weapons, who has the means to use them, who wants to use them, and who wants to commit continuous murder and genocide in order to stay in power. That is not a person we can negotiate or talk to. We have tried and failed because we're not dealing with a rational actor.
And what I'm saying is, how is intervention a better solution to that? I keep telling you the amount of death and destruction it could potentially cause. I keep telling you you're opening the gates of hell afterwards to what could take its place. Another regime could easily pop up in the aftermath. Maybe multiple regimes could pop up in the aftermath of a war on the peninsula. World War III could break out as a result of a war on the Korean peninsula. There's so many unanswered questions. There's so many things that could go wrong. Can Kim Jong-un be negotiated with? Probably not, but I think it's better to try that than nothing. And if it means waiting until he dies or he leaves office or he's removed from office for somebody else to come in and hopefully they'll be a more even head, so be it. I would rather that happen than start a war that could potentially be one of the biggest mistakes in human history.
War is terrible. It is never ideal. But we have to go to war against the DPRK. We have to go to war against Kim Jong-un first before he acquired nuclear weapons. Are you going to do this again, please?
Right. Go ahead then. Okay, mute me.
Are we going to let him acquire nuclear weapons? It's okay. I literally let you do a several-minute speech, and then you interrupt me 5 seconds in. Let me
I
finish.
will mute him if he interrupts.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Now, in war is terrible. It is not ideal. It is not desired. We obviously do not want to live in a world in which war is the answer to all our problems. Unfortunately, we are dealing with dictators and despots who, to them, violence is a means of solving your problems. And this means that we must be prepared to use violence to get rid of them. Let's use your example. Well, you're opening the gates to World War III. There were many people who thought that if we went to war against Nazi Germany and we were put in Europe, that would mean that we would risk a war with the Soviet Union. Guess what happened? It didn't happen. There were people who assumed that in Korea, involving ourselves in that affair, that, well, if we involve ourselves there, all we're doing is inviting, the possibility of, an even worse regime to take hold in the South. And guess what? The South Korea today is a democratic government with a high standard of living. Look, well, it's also okay. Dictators and despots do not have a legal monopoly on violence against their people, and war is terrible. But war is necessary to remove these actors. And in the place of the United States is always in a position and has been in a position to ensure peaceful transitions to democratic government, as we did in Iraq. There is a mostly stable government in the nation right now that is democratic. It's not a totalitarian despot. It is not controlled by another nationalist Baathist dictator. It is now has free elections with an elected parliament and an elected assembly and an elected president. And so history does not support your conclusion, sir.
Hold on a second. I'm going to look up something a minute. Okay, how many people died under the Iraqi regime?
All right. Again, so we had 50,000 to. Oh, sorry. Are you asking me, or are you going to speak?
No. I'm saying how many people died under Saddam Hussein's regime.
All right. Well, let's start. So let's go with 50,000 to around 185,000 estimated Kurds who were killed in the Anfal campaign, who were literally gassed to death by weapons of mass destruction, by nerve agents, and also murdered by his criminal Baathist regime. Let's not also forget the tens of thousands of Assyrian Christians. And for those of you viewers who don't know who Assyrians are, I'm not referring to Syrians, I'm referring to Assyrians. They are an ethnic group within Iraq who are largely Christian and are descended of the Babylonians. Tens of thousands who were thrown in his prisons and who were never seen again. And if you want more evidence of this, I would refer you to a book by Mona K. Oshana, who when I find the book, I will send it to you. Let's not also forget the tens of thousands that he killed in Kuwait with his invasion. Let's not forget the millions, repeat millions, he killed during the Iran-Iraq war, in which millions of Iranians and Iraqis died in his war of aggression and of conquest. And let us not also forget his own criminal regime, which killed tens of thousands and if not hundreds of thousands. So to suggest that, and when I know what you're trying to get at, you're trying to say that the estimates of around 200,000 civilians dying in
Iraq. About 500,000 people died in the Iraq war.
That's highly disputed. The civilians who died in Iraq around 180,000.
Most numbers I've seen is around 500,000 or more.
Okay, well, I will send you something on that so you can see.
You sound like a tanky trying to dispute the Holodomor now.
That is absolutely such a disgusting comparison, sir, if I may say.
I know, because I was a tanky who tried to defend against the Holodomor. I know this argument.
And the Holodomor was an act of genocide. The Iraq war was a war to liberate the people. And guess what happened? A mass murdering dictator is no longer the president of that country. He no longer gets to allows his son to
The only
literally
cost and the cost
Iraqi
and the
women
only
at will.
and the only cost was 500,000 people. So what you're saying is
No, no,
you're fine
no,
with half
no,
a
no, no, no,
million
no.
people.
Civilians who died in Iraq numbered more than 180,000 since 2003, but they did not number in the
My
half
God.
million
Oh my
section.
God. You
And those people were,
sound like me a year and a half ago.
and those people, may I remind you, were not killed by coalition forces. They were largely killed by Sunni versus Shia clashes, which were stoked by the Iranian government and by Ba'athist paramilitaries who
Point
wanted
is,
to commit as much chaos as possible.
but the point is, would any of this happened if the United States just did not intervene?
There would have been violence. Yes, there would have been continued violence. You leave the Korean if you would left Saddam Hussein in power, guess what would have happened? He still would have been killing his own people, hundreds.
I understand
And
that.
then,
I mean, I think
so you admit that he would have still been killing people if he had stayed in power. You just think that removing a mass murdering dictator was a bad idea.
I'm not against I'm against removing a mass murdering dictator when it also requires a mass loss of human life. Yeah, I'm pretty strongly against that. I'm afraid.
No, you're against it. Seems
I only believe in intervention if it poses a threat to said country who is invading, and in my opinion, that did not pose a major threat that warranted the deaths of 500,000 Iraqis.
your numbers are incorrect there. Again, there are more than 180,000 Iraqi civilians, and those deaths are obviously tragic. No one can take.
Okay, how's that different?
Those deaths were caused by the Ba'athists and by the Sunni militias. They were not caused by coalition forces. And just
would they have happened at all? Would they have happened?
Can I finish? Can I finish? Just like in World War II, in which, yes, there were hundreds of thousands of German civilians who died in that war, but we had to stop Adolf Hitler from literally conquering the world. And same thing in Japan. We literally had hundreds of thousands of civilian casualties. We had to stop Hirohito from literally dominating East Asia.
Do you think Saddam Hussein had the resources to conquer the world?
Saddam Hussein had already shown that he wanted to conquer many countries in the region, just like Japan did. Japan, and just like fascist Italy. All right. So you said that, well, he didn't want to conquer the world. Did he not invade Iran? Did he not invade Kuwait? Did he not send troops into Saudi Arabia? His goal was war, and his goal was conquest and to oppress as many people as he could. So once again, you're wrong, sir.
All right.
But what my question is, could he have conquered the world in any practical form? Because I would highly
given enough time, any dictator or despot, if they make evil decisions, can do that. All right. And Saddam Hussein was trying, as you know, to get nuclear weapons, and the Israelis thankfully stopped him from doing that. And I cannot think of the horrible.
And there was no weapons
that would have inflicted on the regions if Saddam Hussein had.
We're way off topic here. Sticks, what was your point you were trying to get at with the numbers?
Well, I was trying to say that this sounds might just be my gut, but it sounds incredibly similar to when I used to try and dismiss the Holodomor when I was a Marxist-Leninist. I'm telling you, as somebody who did make excuses for genocide, that it sounds remarkably similar. It seems like you're trying to deflate the numbers so it makes your argument sound better. Because that was the logic behind mine ultimately. It took me a while to realize that, but when I did get out of Marxism, Leninism, that's what I realized. You're probably in a position where you're defending your ideology so much that you can't see that. it's the same as Holocaust denialism, but
that is the most repugnant comparison you can make. Don't that is the most repugnant comparison. I'm genuinely angry that you compared what I said
you're trying to
in
deflate
Iraq
numbers
being
to make your
killed
side
to
look better.
Holocaust denial. How dare you, sir? How dare you?
How is it different? You're trying to deflate numbers to make your argument look better. It's exactly the same.
Completely different, sir. The Iraq War was a war against genocide. It was a war against.
I'm telling you as
dictator.
I'm
You
telling
know
you-
that.
I'm telling you as a person who once defended genocide, who once
Well,
tried.
I'm not. Well, I'm not a. I'm not a tanky, sir.
Yeah, but you're a neocon.
I'm a neoconservative, yeah, and we're a lot better than tankies who simp for third world dictators and despots. Thank you very much.
Not really. No, not in my opinion. Your
well, your opinion says that Kim Jong Un, you know, it's okay for him to murder because, well,
no, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. You're twisting my words again. I didn't say that. I said I think it's better to try and understand who Kim Jong Un is, so we can make progress in negotiations with North Korea. That's all I said. I didn't say I defended Kim Jong Un's actions in any way, shape, or form.
Sir, when you say that you said that, well, I didn't grow up a dictator, so, you know, I can't know what was right or wrong from his perspective. That is moral relativism. It is.
Say you can't know what it was like being Kim Jong Un. That's all.
I don't care whether it was like Kim Jong Un. So what if he was groomed to be a dictator? Does that give him the legal authority to commit mass murder? Absolutely not. You excuse it.
I don't excuse it. I believe that it's more important to understand who Kim Jong Un is as a person and who his regime is, and not be blinded by labels like evil and crackpot. I think that does harm damage to the world.
Like, we all agree on that, right?
Wait, I think he is a terrible piece of shit. Yeah, I think.
Then you don't want to do anything about it.
What?
But you don't want to do anything about it.
No, I want to negotiate with North Korea and even if no matter how small the change is, if we can get any change out of North Korea, I think it's worth it, and I think it would be a much better choice than any war in the Korean Peninsula. That's what my argument is.
Okay, sir, you have a dictator who has literally ordered his own civilian population,
and you keep
literally to feed his own people because he won't provide the means for them to be taken care of. You seriously think that person would negotiate in good faith? You interrupted me just as I was making my point.
Can you promise? Can you promise then that tens of millions of people won't die in a war at the Korean Peninsula? Can you promise?
Yes, tens of millions of people will not die in a war.
I'll hold your words to that.
You are scaremongering.
No, I'm not scaremongering. I'm being very rational. I'm very rationally scared of a war at the Korean Peninsula, believe it or not.
All right, Sticks, I want to hear his explanation.
This is coming from the guy who left a comment saying, "Oh, I'm going to be so proud to die in North Korea, like fight in North Korea and die in it." Like, this is why I think you're just as bad as the
Okay, so now you want. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so I knew this would come up. I was pretty respectful, but then you want to get personal. Well, Mr. Sticks, you think
you have so little value for human life, and you're so willing.
That is ridiculous. No, I have more value for life than you do. I don't think that a dictator has a legal right to kill his people. You have no value for human rights. You just said that, well, yeah, he's bad, but what can we do? Or does it matter, you know?
No, I didn't say that at all. I said
you are so privileged.
You're so privileged as well, I assume.
Yeah, and I understand my privilege. I accept.
I understand my privilege as well.
You say, well, it doesn't matter.
I was a Maoist third worldist at one point. I hated the West, and I called myself a spoiled piece of shit. I know my position in society is privileged, but I think it's way more arrogant and pompous to say go to war in such a volatile part of the world and risk the lives of millions and millions of people and the destruction of entire countries. Yeah, I think you're the one who's a bit more pompous and arrogant. I'm not the one who's wanting to start a major war and potentially kill just as many people as the Korean regime has killed.
Oh, Mr. Sticks, you once again use scaremongering exaggeration, but the reality is, Mr. Sticks, is war with North Korea is necessary and is needed because we have to remove a dictator and despot. And yes, good people will sadly die. That is tragic. But also the bad
Millions and millions will die.
Okay, I didn't even get 5 seconds without interruption. Thank you. You have an individual who literally is a dictator and despot. You admit that. He commits murder. You admit that. But you admit you don't want to do anything about it because you use these laundering tactics that a war will kill tens of millions without any evidence to support it.
I said
that a war in North Korea is needed and necessary just as much as World War I was necessary, just as much as World War II was necessary. And for you to ignore it and pretend that it's not, ignore it at your own peril, sir. Meanwhile, you know people are suffering and you don't give a damn. Oh my God, Mr. Sticks, you just keep talking over me, don't you?
Because I've told you what my position is. My position
and I've told you my position, but you don't want to hear it. I keep hearing you and you keep interrupting me, Mr. Sticks. Please.
I just want to say this.
Okay.
Seoul itself
you're saying millions won't die in a war at the peninsula. How on earth can you possibly predict that?
The animus is on you, sir. You made the claim that tens of millions have died.
Yeah, it's a very real possibility.
So it's on you, sir, to prove that. Okay. So, look at Iraq, for example. It's tragic that 180,000 civilians around there died, but those people did not die because
of died
forces. They died because of Ba'athist paramilitary groups and Sunni and Shia militias fighting one another. And in the same case in North Korea, there would be members of the government who would try to go underground and wage a sectarian ethnic war. But that is a necessary fight we have to fight. It's the same thing in World War II and World War I. Millions but those wars were necessary because we had to fight them. And if we had let the dictators and despots then do what they wish, they would own the world, sir. So no, Mr. Sticks, your philosophy is not proven by history. Your philosophy.
Give me an estimation of how many people will die in a
No, I'm not going to play this alternate history game, sir. You threw out the number 10 million. You prove it.
I will just say this, and Sticks, hold on, you can mute your mic for a second.
I'm not saying 10 million people will die. I said potentially.
Hold on now.
Potentially 50 million people could die.
Hold on. I will say this much. All right. Can we all agree that if the Koreas go to war, that they're going to go, North Korea is going to go for Seoul. Seoul has almost 10 million people in and of itself. I forget how much Pyongyang has right offhand.
That's not to mention the Japanese targets that are
Tokyo, Okinawa.
You're talking about 30, 40 million people.
That might be a bit much.
May I come in, sir, and make a counter to that?
Of course.
Thank you, sir. You're much more respectful than Mr. Sticks. My point, so in this case in which you mentioned Seoul, sir, for example, Seoul is obviously a target of the North, but there has often been a misconception that, well, if the South and the North go to war, Seoul will be leveled in ruins because the North will focus all its artillery and its weapons on that one site. Seoul is close to North Korea, but it's not that close. Remember, with North Korea's military assets, only some of its artillery could hit the country. And in order to try and mass its artillery to sort of hit Seoul, if that were, desired, they would have to compact them very close together, very close to the border, which would make them perfect targets for American air power or for South Korean air power.
Fair,
And-
we do have the THAAD missile system near the North Korean border, but
Even without nukes, there's hundreds of tunnels that have been dug underneath the country. They could send conventional.
to be fair, that's on both sides. It's not just
It's on both sides, but still, that'll lead to that would still lead to the deaths of probably like 10 million people, maybe more.
Well, that would not be true, and that example of your policy, sir, of isolation with North Korea, or as you call it, isolating them, which has not worked. You have said that, well, we can isolate North Korea. Well, if North Korea's government is still ordering its military to dig tunnels into the South for the purpose of military action against the South, then it shows that your policy, sir, has failed. If the North continues to show aggressive action against the South, as it's shown, then it has shown that your policy of isolating them has failed.
It
has failed.
It's kept military conflict at bay for 70 years.
Since the 50s.
Yeah, since the 50s.
So, well, no, there have been a few skirmishes.
There's been skirmishes, but there's been no. The Korean War has not resumed on any large scale.
It is still technically an ongoing war. I will say that.
Yeah, it's technically an ongoing war, but there hasn't been any major military attacks since the 1950s. So yeah, the policy of containment, it's not perfect, but it is keeping the country contained and at bay. And your position of taking a war that has so many question marks behind it, to me, is ludicrous. It makes no sense, and I think most rational people would oppose it. Can you see why? Can you see why war hawks are pretty despised by most political ideologies universally?
No, they're not, and we're obviously making a comeback now. The neoconservative movement is making a strong comeback, and we're going to continue that under people like Liz Cheney, for example, because unlike yourself, sir, in which moral relativism is okay, we have a stand in our group that says no. We'll take a stand for honesty and truth and for accountability. That's why
it doesn't matter if you think.
And let me and to get back to your point, sir, that your policy has worked because there hasn't been a war. Millions upon millions of people have died in North Korea as a result of this policy. You know that, but yet you say that
millions of people.
I find that laughable, sir.
Yeah, millions and millions would have died regardless of what policy was put in place.
Oh no, that's not true.
They don't, I'll give you credit. Maybe it was worth intervening in North Korea like maybe 60, 70 years ago, but not today. The implications are so astronomically, like, they're so grave that I don't know how it doesn't make you shit your pants. I don't understand how you're just dismissing it so easily.
I have not dismissed it, as you have known. I have already said that wars.
You said you can guarantee
deaths are tragic, but guess what? You have just said, sir, that the policy has worked, and I'm being interrupted again.
Because you guaranteed that millions of people wouldn't die in that war. That was your words. You said that millions of people.
Yes. And because you said, sir, that tens of millions would die, and I responded.
I didn't say millions would die.
You did say tens of millions would die. Look back at the tape.
I said tens of millions could potentially die. That's what I said.
Yes, and that's the scaremongering tactic. And I'll let you continue.
It's not scaremongering if it's based on a very credible threat, a very credible possibility, which you seem to just be like swatting to the side like it's nothing.
You, sir, seem to swat to the side the needs and the human rights and dignity of the people in North Korea because it doesn't affect your privileged lifestyle personally. and it does. And well, I don't care whether people in the West think, well, I want my video games, I want my pleasure, and I want my fun.
Guarantee if
It isn't my business. It is our business, and yeah, and you are scaremongering when you say tens of millions will potentially die.
So what
This is
you're
not based on evidence and fact.
So what you're saying is the North Korean people are just desperate to get are just desperate to for the United States to start a war in the Korean Peninsula.
They're desperate for the United States to remove Kim Jong-un. That's for sure. If war is necessary, yes. I've met. Okay,
yeah,
so
you're jumping over the whole war part. Do you think they're in favor of a massive war that'll kill millions of them?
Not kill millions of them. No, the North Korean. We would not. We would be going after the regime, not the civilians.
I'm not. Yeah, but how do you get to
Are you suggesting that we're going to literally go there and attack the civilians? No.
There's about
military.
There's 10 million people in the reserves in Korea. About almost half the population could be called to arms. So yeah, you could be potentially killing millions of. Well, there would be soldiers in that case, but nonetheless, you'd be killing people.
Yeah, both of the Koreas do have mandatory service. I forget what.
Yeah, North Korea has I think 1.5 million standing troops, and they have 10 million on reserve troops.
They don't have more than the U.S. right offhand, but I know South Korea has around 200,000.
But the North has 10 million on reserve, and they would probably be called to arms to defend North Korea.
Well, here's the thing I've always wondered about that. Sure, they may have the numbers advantage, but they are very malnourished people. And yes, will have the numbers advantage and Sticks. I'm your buddy. But how effective would a starving population be, honestly, in a war?
Oh, I'm not saying they would be effective. That's not my argument. My argument is that the United States is probably going to have to mow down some are going to have to mow down some people to get to the regime. The regime isn't just going to come out with their hands up. They're going to throw everything. They're going to throw everything at you to defend their regime. They're not going to go down without going down in fire.
Oh, of course, nobody.
Mr. Nightmare, may I come in for a moment?
Go right ahead.
Thank you, sir. So that's not true, and you know that from experience.
You've literally.
I didn't even get 3 seconds in, and you interrupted.
Because you've literally been arguing for like an hour how Kim Jong-un's a madman, and.
Thank you. So that is not true based off history. Look at Iraq, for example. Okay, the United States was welcomed in many areas, especially in Kurdish areas and Assyrian areas, Assyrian Christian areas, because we were seen as the nation that was toppling a dictator who brutalized and massacred and oppressed their peoples. In the same context, that would be the same thing with North Korea, just like it was in Italy. It was not the people did not get lock, stock, and barrel behind Mussolini. In fact, there was a coup against Mussolini because the people did not want to fight a war against the United States. They wanted to get rid of Mussolini and have peace with the United States. And the people throughout Italy welcomed the United States for liberating their country from Benito Mussolini's tyranny. So history proves you wrong once again, sir.
You're neglecting to acknowledge that the circumstances in North Korea are completely different. North Korea, their population, basically there's been generations now that have been taught that the regime is their world. And I think a lot more of them are going to be willing to die for their homelands than you let on. There's even defectors I've seen that are still like grappling with whether they think Kim Jong-un is some kind of demigod still. It's no comparing it to Iraq and comparing it to Italy there's no comparison. They haven't had their dictator was, well, for example, Italy, their Mussolini, how long was he in power for? 15 years or something?
I'll look it up.
maximum, that's not enough time to build up a cult around you. They've had generations to build up this cult of personality around the regime. So yeah, no, they're going to. I'm pretty sure a lot of them are going to defend it to the death. And even if they don't, there's 1.5 million troops on standby. You're going to have to mow down 1.5 million troops at least, and that's not including the 10 millions in reserves. So no, I don't. I don't think you're. I think this idea that you're just going to walk in and there's not going to be a drop of blood spilled is ridiculous.
17 years. He was in power from 28 to 45.
Like, well, that's 2 years of difference. It's not even comparable to how long the regime in North Korea has lasted. But if you wait, no, let me finish. If you were right, then something like Vietnam should have been a piece of cake. If we were going by your logic.
Them jungles are bitches.
By your logic, the North Vietnamese should have left the Viet Cong in droves, but they didn't. Millions fought for the Viet Cong, and the United States.
I just want to say, Todd,
how do you not know that North Korea is not going to be another Vietnam?
Sticks. Todd does bring up a good point in the chat. I don't think you're thinking of this and how a modern military would go at it. I don't think there's going to be a land invasion by the U.S. I don't think that's going to happen. More than likely, there's going to.
Doesn't matter.
May I counter to the points that Mr. Sticks made after you're done?
Yeah, I'm done. Go right ahead.
Okay, so Mr. Sticks, you have once again suggested that the North Korean people, under false assumptions, would get lock, stock, barrel behind the dictator Kim Jong-un, and that it's not the same thing as Iraq or as Italy or as Nazi Germany, in which Americans were welcomed as heroes because they liberated the people from despotic regimes. You seem to say, well, in Italy, you know, people were liberated and celebrated the Americans, but it's not the same thing. Well, in Iraq, people were liberated and they celebrated the Americans, but it's not the same thing. You once again ignore history in that regard. And then, sir, you say that they will get behind the regime and that millions will fight to support the country. Do you realize, sir, that in North Korea, the military is literally under dire straits? There are military individuals who literally are involved, and not just on small scale, on a massive scale, in drug running and in drugs and in human exploitation and in human smuggling, because the military can't even afford to, the government can't even afford to pay them. And so they are literally starving and hungry. Let's not forget the soldier who ran across the demilitarized zone. When he was in the hospital, the doctors discovered that the man literally had numerous tapeworms inside of him and that he was literally in a starving diet. So this idea that somehow they're pristine six-pack abs soldiers ready to go is not true.
I didn't say that.
No, you are giving the assumption that I'm saying that they're willing to die, and it's not true. Some yes, but no.
Portion of them are willing to die. Yeah, they are, because they've literally been brought up in a regime where they've been taught that this regime is their world. They've been taught that. There's been 3 or 4 generations now that have been brought up to believe this. 3 generations have been brought up to believe this. That you just have to look at documentaries on North Korea and the way they talk about the regime. Yeah, you can say the regime are making them do that, but a lot of it seems pretty damn genuine. And at this point, I think they've probably got Stockholm syndrome with their regime. I mean, if we can get people to voluntarily, what was I going to say? If people can voluntarily blow themselves up, I'm pretty sure people are gonna blow themselves in a totalitarian regime where they've been taught from birth that the leader is a demigod?
And the same thing in Iraq, in which Saddam Hussein was essentially worshipped. Okay, every family in Iraq had to have a picture of Saddam Hussein in their home. No one, people, everyone had to come out once a year for Saddam's birthday and literally celebrate as if it was the best day of their lives. We had a similar situation in Iraq, sir, in which you had a terrible dictator who created a cult of personality, as what we see in North Korea. And guess what? That regime fell, and it did not, as you say,
It fell and 500,000 people died.
That's not true. I just gave you this. I already sent the statistics.
Yeah, I know. I know. You're a denier, but okay.
Well, Mr. Sticks, you're obviously a denier that people suffer and die in North Korea and just don't care.
I don't deny anything.
So there you go. I just caught you. You said you don't deny it, but you don't care.
It's not that I don't care. I have different solutions. I have different means to an end. And in my opinion, my means are a lot more rational and put a lot less at risk on the table.
That we've been negotiating. We've tried to negotiate for North Korea for 30 years.
Yeah.
How many more years is it going to take for your solution to work while millions suffer and die?
And how is a war better?
By removing a mass murdering dictator and despot who literally oppresses his people and kills millions.
And what's going to be left over after it?
A democratic, free republic.
How do you know that?
Yes, you do. Yes, we do. It happened in Italy. It happened in Germany. It happened in Iraq. It happens all the time. So yes,
it didn't happen in Vietnam. It didn't happen in Laos. It didn't happen. Well, it didn't happen in Korea. It didn't happen.
The United States did not go to war with Laos. Thank you, sir. That's not even true. Okay. And in Vietnam, as you mentioned before, we did not fight that war to win it. We fought simply to keep a presence there, but not to beat the North Vietnamese.
I mean, you went to pretty damn extreme lengths to defend a bit of land.
And
you could almost say it was a bit genocidal. It was almost like you were trying to take over the North.
You know, it's so funny how I said earlier when you asked me, would war be better? And I said yes, because we would remove a mass murdering dictator and despot. And then you asked me what would be left in North Korea's place? And I told you a democratic free republic where human rights was respected. And you dismissed that once again.
I'm disputing that would ever happen.
It happened in Italy. It happened in Germany. It happened in Iraq. And thank you.
And what about what about the places it hasn't happened?
Why are you so okay with people suffering under despotic regimes for
why are you
squeamish about casualties?
Why are you so squeamish about casualties? Why are you so determined to underplay how awful war is, and how especially awful a war in the Korean Peninsula has the potential to be?
I didn't downplay it. You know what I said.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
Tragic. But you downplay and ignore the people suffering.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
I don't ignore it. I've already told you what my position is, and it's not ignoring it.
Yes, it is. And because you have just said
it's
not working.
At what point did I use the word ignore?
Containment is ignoring. It's just like I said.
No, it's not.
Like when libertarians say that non-interventionism is not isolationism. Yes, they're one and the same. It's like let's look at, for example, World War II. So Ireland, Switzerland, Sweden, their policy of non-intervention to defend democracy was a policy of isolationism, and that we don't care what happens to other people.
Ireland's doing pretty good.
Affect us.
Ireland's doing pretty well now. Like, that's not a good example of how non-intervention is a bad thing.
Yes, it is.
How is it? Ireland's
I'll close.
Ireland's a pretty like it's a pretty has a pretty prosperous economy, and they haven't had much in terms of violence for like 20 years.
Are you not forgetting the IRA in Northern Ireland, right?
Yeah, that's
And are you
yeah,
not are you forgetting that?
No, I'm
and
not.
Also,
No,
let's
no,
not
no,
forget
no, no,
too
no,
that
no, no,
let's.
no, I'm not forgetting that. I said 20
Six,
years.
can I make a point? Can I make a point?
I said 20 years, which was after the peace agreement,
Oh,
and
yeah.
most of that violence was concentrated in Northern Ireland, not
Yeah.
Ireland.
And let me also make the quick point too about Ireland, as you say. Well, what you said. Oh, you suggested. Oh, well, non-intervention in World War II was good, and it worked out for them. Really, nations that stood on the sidelines while Hitler and Mussolini and Hirohito were rampaging and slaughtering millions was a good idea. And let's not forget, sir, Mr. Sticks, that after World War II, Ireland was very fond of letting in Nazi war criminals into its country.
Okay, I'm not an expert on Ireland, but I don't I don't think the Irish people have had a duty to be part of that war if they didn't want to be.
Are you serious? The world did not have a duty to fight in World War II against some of the biggest dictators in world history. I rest my case with that. I rest my case.
Well, no, I don't think any country. I don't think any. I don't think any country has a duty to intervention. I told you earlier. I only believe intervention is necessary when it poses a major threat to that country.
Yes, we do have a duty to intervene, and the world.
Who's telling me I have to intervene? You?
You are a moral relativist, so I suppose you don't care about other people.
We're gonna have to cut
It doesn't affect your personal.
Get back into that argument. Where does morality derive from then?
Sticks, we're gonna have to cut this off in about 10 minutes. So make your closing arguments.
Okay, you can go first, I guess.
No, Nightmare, you choose. Who do you want to go first?
Doesn't matter to me. I'm currently doing something in the kitchen.
All right, Sticks, you go first then.
Okay, fine. I think you're. To conclude, I don't think a nation necessarily has an obligation to get involved in a conflict. I believe this light-hearted attitude to war is very juvenile, and it's very it's very immature, and I think it's going to lead to the deaths of millions. I think neocons are no better than tankies or Nazis. I think they all have the same. They share the same lack of value for human life, and I'm telling you, as an ex-tanky, get out of this fucking ideology before it eats you up.
All right. All right. Is that if you're closed, then I will begin my closing. For Mr. Sticks to conflate neoconservatism and as somehow equatable to Nazism is laughable, when neoconservatives were responsible for smashing Nazism in Europe, because neoconservatives then, at least although they did not call themselves neoconservatives then, humanitarian interventionists then said that we had a duty and an obligation to fight Adolf Hitler. We had a duty to fight Emperor Hirohito, and we had a duty to fight Benito Mussolini, because the suffering of others, whether it's an ocean away or a mile away, is our concern. The moral relativistic attitude that we can ignore dictators and despots, because it's not personally affecting us, has led to the suffering of millions globally throughout history. It is what allowed dictators like Saddam Hussein to oppress and ruin his people and create Iraq into essentially his own personal playground, where his son literally raped any woman he wanted, where he could literally kill anyone at his whim if he wished, and where his family did the same thing. It has created a situation in North Korea in which we have a dictator now who has a nuclear arsenal and who has shown that he does not care for negotiation, as it has been offered to him many times, but is interested only in war. And the longer we continue to kick this can down the road, the more suffering, human suffering, will continue throughout the globe. And it is the duty of strong nations and the duty of just nations who rule by law, justice, and order to defend those who are ruled by systems of oppression, destruction, and evil. Thank you.
All right, and that concludes this episode. I want to thank Net7 for being on. We will be back. Should probably, I want to say Friday, we'll release an episode. So, like, sub, all that shit. Or not, I can't control you. You're your own person. All right, bye, guys. Good night. Goodbye.